This is Module 3, Governing Sustainability Projects. So the objective on this module is to look at how you develop a sustainability management plan, define the key process groups within that management plan, look at how governance needs for sustainability projects need to be created, identify the people required to be successful in governing a sustainability project, define the information needs for sustainability governance, and look at what organizational requirements might need to be made or changed to enable successful governance of sustainability in projects. So continuing on with the model of the IISPM, really this whole issue of governance is around monitoring and controlling projects. So these are the checkpoints, if you will, to see where projects are, what the status is, and how we actually report that into the executive. So let's start and look at the actual sustainability plan and governance overview. So there's a couple of things that we need to be clear on. The sustainability management plan is a key input into the whole governance process. And this plan describes the processes by which sustainability will be managed, and it's the organizational standard for the management of sustainability within projects. So once the organization decides to move forward with sustainability, you'll create a standard, you'll create some requirements for a management plan, and this becomes a key document to use to manage the governance of a program or a project moving forward. So sustainability project governance then is the ability of an organization to monitor, control, report, and forecast the status of the sustainability indicators that the organization has agreed to track and trace. Then the sustainability KPIs, or SKPIs, are measures of how well the project is meeting the sustainability targets set out by the organization. So SKPIs are defined and agreed at an organizational level and monitored at the project level. So these SKPIs are what you're reporting throughout the lifetime of the project. So why do we need a sustainability management plan? The SMP process ensures that we know the complexity, the scale, the value, the priority, and the visibility of the project within the organization. We also understand the risk of the project to the organization, the community, and the environment. These are the key elements for the sustainability management plan. So why do we need governance? And this is a question which is asked on all projects, whether sustainable or not. We need to understand how the resources are being used within an organization. We need to understand that what the vision of a project is, what the mission of it is, and what the goals are. So the information and governance reporting allows us to look at our future resource needs and evaluate how we're doing on meeting the strategic targets that we've defined within the organization that we're trying to fulfill by executing various projects. So adding sustainability practices to an organization, we need to modify the existing governance models and extend them to allow us to report on the sustainability measures that the organization has agreed to adopt. So moving on and looking specifically at the sustainability management plan, there are some key contents to the plan. Executive summary, the purpose of the plan, the key components, the scope of the sustainability project management, the formal and informal verification techniques that we're going to use, definition and glossary of course, any change management processes that we will use to manage particularly the sustainability elements, references and commitment statements from the key stakeholders to incorporate sustainability and what those targets will be. So in order to build the SMP, we need to look at the processes and make sure that the processes to build a project and the processes to incorporate sustainability are actually applied. It's not so much the processes only, but we also have to instill the spirit of sustainability into the whole decision-making process. So this means a tie-in from the executive level as well. We have a published sustainability process model. We ensure that all project management participants are available and that we have information for the project stakeholders and all levels of management. So this implementation may actually result in the development of a new change management plan and implementation plan, and this needs to be incorporated into the administration and planning of the project as well. So the inputs to create the sustainability management plan. We need the inputs from project scope management. We need the cost model, so we need the cost management plan. We need to understand the schedule through schedule management planning. We need to understand how the organization is going to require communication, so we need a communications management plan. And we need to look at the enterprise environmental factors. So all of these inputs will create the guts, if you will, of the sustainability management plan and allow proper governance as you move forward through the project. So some of the tools and techniques that were used to create the SMP, a lot of this, of course, is going to be based around planning meetings and analysis, risk analysis, outputs, and there's a separate module on risk. Cost-benefit analysis, so the cost-benefit analysis again will be extended to include those sustainability elements that have been defined for the organization. Typical brainstorming sessions, analysis sessions, etc. And also the sustainability process model in and of itself. So this process model will define what the targets are, what sustainability elements we're going to be incorporating within the projects that have been defined and agreed on by the organization. So the outputs is the sustainability management plan, and it's a living document that is a necessary part of the governance process for the project. In order to govern something, we need to have that baseline. We need to have the understanding and the consolidation of the information that we've agreed, that the organization has agreed on, and that the organization is behind. So now we look at proper sustainability governance. There's an underlying assumption when we talk about sustainability governance is that we expect that projects are being governed appropriately in an organization today. So sustainability governance is the process that is used to gather and report on how the finite resources in an organization are actually being used, evaluate how they're being managed, and be able to provide concise information to management and the executive about how we're progressing towards our targets. So depending on the type of project, you'll report governance monthly, bi-weekly, potentially weekly. The longer the duration of the project, the greater the span of time between governance reports will be. If your project is going to be lasting 2 years, there's very little sense in adding the administrative overhead to report governance on that project every couple of weeks. A monthly reporting cycle would be sufficient to allow management control. Where that might change, of course, is as you get closer to the end of the project and we're starting to tie things up and we're starting to understand where all of our costs may be, where all the resource usage might be, you might actually tighten up your governance reporting and start reporting governance every couple of weeks. Or alternatively, if your project has gone somewhat off track, you may tighten up governance reporting to have a better focus on it from all management levels for a period of time. So you might go from monthly down to bi-weekly, or in extreme cases you might even be reporting governance on a weekly basis. So as I said, this is a monitoring and controlling process within projects. So if we look at this in terms of the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs, so the inputs to sustainability governance are the sustainability management plan. We need the information on sustainability that we've created and stored through the SIM system, the Sustainability Information and Management System. We need to understand the work performance information, and this can be coming from earned value, this can be coming from other management information systems that we've created to track progress towards targets. We also need to understand the financial targets, the financial reporting for the project, what we've actually spent, what we're planning on spending. Are we actually on our projected budget lines? Are we actually on our projected spend lines? Are we underperforming? Are we overperforming? So we also need to have a very clear understanding of the performance of the project team itself and how we're actually progressing towards creating the deliverables. The tools and techniques that we use for governing sustainability projects, we look at the sustainability items reassessment. So we've defined sustainability within the project. So as we look at those particular items, we have to assess and reassess our targets or our movement towards those targets. So for instance, if one of the sustainability items is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by limiting travel of project team members, then we can evaluate if we've had to, for instance, take emergency meetings and fly people around. Will we actually meet targets, or do we have to get a reevaluation and a reassessment of that target for that particular project? We'll do audits on sustainability. So the sustainability targets that we've got, are we actually meeting them? Are we actually doing what we say or what we said we were going to be doing? We use tools like variance and trend analysis. We look at continuous improvements. So are we looking to our project team to suggest ways to meet and exceed the sustainability targets that we've defined for the project? We do this using project status meetings. We use sustainability governance meetings and tools. All of these things become the tools and techniques to ensure proper governance and to ensure proper monitoring and controlling of the processes. The outputs of the sustainability governance and the monitoring controlling processes are updates to the Sustainability Information Management System, the SIMS. We look at updates to the organizational process assets. So we look at the processes that we're using within governance, and we say, as part of the outputs of the process of controlling the project, we may change how we actually do things moving forward. Any document updates as a result of the governance processes. So if, for instance, we have to change the plan, if we're going to readjust budgets, if we're changing the risk profile or managing that risk profile, all of these document updates are done at this point. And this includes updates to the project management plan itself. Governance in itself is really looking at three main areas of the organization. We need to understand the information needs of the organization. We need to understand the structure of the organization that we're working in. And we need to understand who in the organization is affected by the projects and programs that we're delivering. By looking at these three areas in combination, we're able to provide oversight and control to the projects being executed. And these also become inputs to how the organization evaluates the strategies and the sustainability targets that we've incorporated into the projects. So this is where we need to extend governance measures to report on these SKPIs, and we need to understand how this knowledge is affected in these three areas of information, structure, and the actual people in the organization. So let's start by looking at the information needs of the organization and the organizational requirements around information needs. So different organizations have different requirements for information. So if we look at publicly traded companies on the US Stock Exchange, all those companies must comply with Sarbanes-Oxley requirements. So there is an information requirement in order for them to meet their legal obligations. Government organizations have a public duty to store information and make that available through Access to Information Acts. Not-for-profit groups need to show their funding agencies how the monies are being spent that they've been allocated. All of these are different. Privately run corporations have the obligation to their employees to share information on how well the company is doing. All of these organizations have information requirements in common. They need to gather, manage, and monitor and control projects, and they need to do that through information. These projects are delivering the products and services of the organization, so they need to know what is actually going on. So once an organization adopts a strategy for sustainability, the information needs to support that strategy have to be defined. And there's a few questions that need to be asked around this. What particular information is required, and how will the information be gathered? These questions are answered by what the sustainability targets the organization has adopted are as part of its strategy. the key area around information needs is that the information has to be useful and usable. So when we ask about what information is required, we need to be very clear that what we're asking is what is required to manage sustainability within these projects. So what are the benefits to the organization of the information? So are we gathering information to be used to measure adherence to a process? How is that a benefit to the organization? Are we gathering information to measure progress towards a particular target? How is that of benefit to the organization? Or on the contrary side, are we being asked to gather information which only satisfies an administrative requirement which actually adds little or no value to the organization? This is the responsibility of the sustainability project manager to evaluate these information needs and requests and work with the organization to only expend resources and time gathering information that is actually useful and usable. So there are different drivers for information needs. So there are the legislative drivers. There is environmental legislation. There's cradle-to-grave responsibilities. There's electronic waste recycling legislation, material and chemical composition, atmospheric emissions, water use requirements, water discharge requirements, etc. All of these are legislated areas where corporations that are active or executing projects which have an effect in these areas must comply with these requirements. There are also industry standards that organizations sign up to and get measured against. So ISO 5001 energy management standards, the ISO 14000 standards on sustainability, so 14064 greenhouse gas emissions, extensions of that to validate and verify greenhouse gas emissions. If an organization has adopted these standards, then in order to maintain their certifications, they have to measure and report with information on how these standards are being actually utilized. There are also internal drivers for information needs. So beyond what the government and standards require, there are also the requirements based on corporate policies and strategic decisions of the organization. Employee initiatives, shareholder requirements, global policies of a corporation, involvement in the community, water, waste management, power conservation, logistics management, recycling programs. All of these drive information needs as well. Corporate requirements for information are used to track progress towards targets. Corporations have a responsibility to understand how resources are actually being used. There's a finite number of people available to execute projects in an organization, so we have to be able to make decisions to say, are we doing the best that we can with the people and the resources that we have available to us? At a sustainability level, looking at the corporate level, each project may be tasked, for instance, to cap greenhouse gas emissions to a certain level. We can only evaluate whether we're doing this if we have the information available and if the measures are in place to actually gather that information. How do we know how much greenhouse gases the project is actually creating? What are the measures that we're using? In the information industry, we may be only looking at GHG emissions by the amount of travel that we do, and we may need to reduce that. If we're looking at product shipment and product movement around the world, how is that product actually transported? Is it transported by air? Is it transported by truck? Is it transported by ship? All of these have different GHG emission profiles. The project will have certain targets as well that are unique only to that project. So for instance, if we're creating something new, and we might be introducing a new material into a production project or production process, we have to know how that material is being created. Is it new? Is it a reused material? Is it a unique source, virgin source material? And we may be looking at creating new processes for reuse of information. All of these are project-specific requirements. So if we look at information needs and try and summarize all of this, we need to know what information is critical to the success of the project. We only want to be measuring and validating that information. Adding sustainability into projects, we have to be very careful not to increase the administrative overhead on project managers in terms of managing that information. So there's corporate systems have to be in place to allow projects to leverage information sources. The systems for gathering and managing information must be simple and effective, and again, deliver only information that is truly beneficial to the ongoing success of the organization. In terms of the organizational needs of governance, structures evolve. Structures need to evolve to meet the changing needs of the organization, its people, and its customers. Internal requirements reflect the nature of the organization and its culture. So how we actually deliver. Rules and regulations dictate certain elements of that structure. For instance, if we are working in a situation that has certain legal ramifications and legal structures, then the organization must be structured to allow that to happen. So for instance, if you're working with information that is security classified, then you have to have processes in place, and the organization structure must be in place to allow only those people with the appropriate security clearances to access that information. External influences shape the organization. The culture that the organization is working in is shaped by, or helps to shape the organizational structure. The requirements for sustainability from external influences can change how an organization is aligned and how it's structured. For instance, if you're working in an area where legislation comes in for renewable power, that you have to have a certain percentage of renewable power in your organization, then you may need to realign how the structure of the organization is in place to meet those requirements. People and their interactions of sending and receiving information and how that becomes part of the organizational structure are also a key component of the governance systems. All the operational aspects and operational arms of an organization have to coordinate how they're working to achieve the sustainability targets that the organization has defined. And this comes back to how information is transmitted, how we actually share information within the organization. If you're working in an organization that has a project management office, usually this is the area which will be gathering and reporting the information. It'll be working with the executives and the project management community to define those standards that support the strategic management of sustainability in the organization. The reporting needs of governance is a requirement to have proper oversight on the project, the processes, and the people. So if we look at this from a sustainability perspective, we look at governance systems to report to the executive, program, and project level around the sustainability aspects that we've added into the project. So at the executive level, we're looking at the financial reports, logistics supply reports, resource plans and levels, and forecast adherence. What are the specific sustainability impacts against these different areas? At a program level, we're looking at SKPI reporting, financial reporting, risk review and management, and schedule review. All of this again across the program of work. And at the project level, individual project governance is looking at the information to be gathered, delivered, and accurately and securely delivered to the executive and program levels. The goal of this whole issue of reporting is to seamlessly integrate sustainability governance systems into existing systems while minimizing this administrative overhead on projects. Looking at the Sustainability Key Performance Indicators, or SKPIs, these KPIs reflect executive strategy and executive sustainability strategies. So, guidelines for developing these sustainability key performance indicators is choose KPIs that matter. There's the tendency for organization to choose 20 performance indicators and measure many of these KPIs, in reality when only a few of them actually matter. So use a SMART test, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, to validate the SKPIs that you're choosing to add for sustainability. Measure performance in areas that are subject to variation only. There's no sense in creating a KPI for an area which is subject to almost no variation. And the adage, less is more. So fewer KPIs that are more meaningful will have a greater impact on understanding sustainability in your organization. SKPIs must be relevant. They must have targets that drive. There must be targets defined for the fulfillment of the SKPIs. The parameters on how information is gathered for each SKPI must be defined, and we have to choose an appropriate reporting process. All of this leads as well to understanding changes in adherence or changes and modifications to the business case. So adding sustainability into the business case includes looking at the cost of adherence to sustainability KPIs, looking at what additional resource requirements may be in place because of sustainability requirements, look at data gathering and reporting tools or the cost of those, how they're going to affect the actual business case. What are the sustainability considerations of the project of the organization? And what does it actually mean to meet the reduction targets defined by the project? The sustainability business case needs to show a net positive benefit to the organization based on community and environmental impact. It's used to justify the cost of doing a project in terms of the value that the project adds to the business. Now, the challenge with sustainability and sustainability components into a business case is changing the paradigm of what we consider to be value. So this has to be agreed with the organization. It has to be agreed with the executive level, with the board of directors, with the key stakeholders in the organization. So traditionally, the key elements of a business case include mission and vision statement, a clear and compelling statement identifying the benefits of the project, specific objectives, the opportunity analysis, risk association, financial breakdown, what the actual proposed project is, and an estimate of the resources that are going to be required to deliver the project. In conclusion, we've looked at the governance needs for sustainability project management. We've identified the people required for successful sustainability governance. We've looked at the information and organizational requirements for successful sustainability governance.